Hi everybody, thanks for joining us for this Q&A of Tiong Bahru Social Club. My name is Daniel, I'm a local filmmaker and I'm here to moderate the Q&A today. And today I'm here with the director of Tiong Bahru Social Club, Bee Thiam, the production designer, James Page, and the costume designer, Melissa Chang. So first of all, I would like to congratulate all of you for a really wonderful and enjoyable film, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I think all of us were really struck by, the whole world building of the film. I mean, we were really transported to a really different world, a world that is really not seen or hasn't been seen in Singapore cinema before. And because of that, it's really exciting for us to see a local film like this, and also for us to, for me to be here today to explore how all of you work together to create this world. So to start with, maybe I'd like to ask Bee Thiam a question about how did you envision this world, and what were your thoughts, your concepts, your inspirations behind this?
I think when we first conceptualized the film, we wanted to make a film that is not so much plot driven, but ideas driven. And one of the references that we have is Tati. And in Tati's film, the story and the plot is always very simple, but there were so many ideas about modernity, about the future, as well as how it affects people. And that was what we are trying to create, ideas and that we have about the society and how we feel about it, and for us to imagine and take it off off a tangent. And which is why the production design, right, the set that we built, the mise en scène, right, is super important, right, for the film, and for these ideas to start, building right along the way in the film as it progresses. Yeah.
So you mentioned Tati. Could you maybe explain a little bit about Tati's work, the French filmmaker Jacques Tati, and the background behind his work, and how do you see it relating to specifically Tiong Bahru in Singapore?
I think Tati's work, is really inspired by the silent comedy of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. But of course, by the time he started making his film in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there's already color and there's already sound. And he would use, visual comedy, with the way he edit, and the way he used sound and music, to create a staging, right, that comments on modernity, especially with how it affects, how technology affects people, and how it affects the way people behave, how the society works. So for him, symmetry as well, and how he composes his image and his sound is so integral to one another, right? That you cannot divorce it, without finding, I think, the comedy in it. So that was what we were trying to create, right? Works like Playtime, works like Monanko were some of the films that we were watching, right? In terms of how he staged, how he builds his sets. And of course, he goes to extremes, right? Building even like buildings itself to create that world. So one of the things that we were trying to do in making the film is to choose a location that will not need us to build those kind of buildings, but that looks like the world that we are at, and for us to either subtract or add things in to create this world. So of course, then Tiong Bahru becomes that ideal set, because that symmetry, that circular, that full circle kind of theme comes into play, and Pearl Bank as well, right? The circular brutalist building in Pearl Bank apartments. And one of the things that we subtract from that world then are the cars, the mobile phones, the computers, because we wanted to make it not a period, not a film that is set in a particular period, right, but in one that is more timeless. Yeah.
So how do you see the brutalist architecture of Pearl Bank as contrasting to the Art Deco architecture of the SIT flats in Tiong Bahru And were you trying to use these two different worlds or styles to play off each other?
So I think the art in Tiong Bahru, there's two different styles, right? There is the Art Deco architecture that was built pre-war, and there's the internationalist style that was built post-war, and they were both all low-lying, which is like only 4 or 5 stories high. Whereas overlooking, Pearl Bank is overlooking Tiong Bahru is the Pearl Bank Brutalist building that was built in the 60s, 70s, much later than Pearl Bank, but that has a shorter lifespan. It is a building that is very forward and futuristic, right, in its time. But of course, for different reasons, it suffered a much shorter life than Tiong Bahru. And for I think a lot of heritage lovers, both have its importance in terms of architectural heritage, but I think one is just luckier than the other. Yeah, so we were also trying to compare, right, the life, right, of two different buildings, almost as if in the society there's two different kind of buildings, a few other kind of classes of people living amongst us. Yeah, some which are more important, right, for us to preserve, and some which is okay, right, for us to let go. Yeah.
Thank you. So, James, I have a question for you. I wanted to ask, how did the themes of the film influence the way you conceptualize the world of Tiong Bahru Social Club? And also, maybe kind of related to that, how was it like working with Bee Thiam, and how did you come up with these ideas? And how was the whole process like?
I think because I was on the project, I'd read the script way before, and then it went quiet, and I didn't know whether the film was being made. And then John Siang came back on board as the producer, and he said, we're going to do it. So that was when I got involved, and the script had changed. And I think the original script, there was this perhaps a greater exploration of all of the different flats and houses in Tiong Bahru. And as with all films, which basically, we're in Singapore and things have to be done on a budget, and there's an ideal world, and there's and what can be done. So I know one of the key things that we all began to discuss, and I think it was very important that this was kind of everyone mutually going down the same path, was this idea of a commune. And I think this commune idea wasn't necessarily there from day one, but as it progressed, there's both the need for budgetary, in that you originally, from what I remember, Guat and Bee, actually they had their own flat, and so then you begin thinking, well, how are we going to afford to do so many different locations? And then you have the practicality of going through Tiong Bahru and realizing there's only so many locations, and they are quite small. So we had this idea of commune, and I think what was really enjoyable for me was the fact that we could come up with these ideas and look at solutions which still warranted a fantastic result in terms of the artistic theme and ideas, but work with a budget. And the writers, B and Auntie, going back and adapting and changing and progressing along with everything else. And I think that then results in a film where you can see that everyone is collectively on the same page, and in that everyone collectively has had a journey where definitely the script, and B is Bee Thiam has said that he's quite open with changes and fluidity within the script, and the actors bringing what they want to bring as well. But we kind of had to set this world. We had to create the world, and then you allow a freedom once you're with it. I think that was very enjoyable. I think I know when we started, we looked at Mon Uncle was one of the main references, and obviously that film, they built the house from scratch, but you can do as best as you can, and I think that's what we did. But yeah, I mean, don't know what else to yeah, I think that answers the question. Yeah.
I mean, I think you talk a lot about limitations, but I think when the audience members like us encounter the film, we are actually struck by how rich actually the world is, and also how much detail was put into the creation of this world. And I was also wondering how, I mean, Bee Thiam mentioned the themes of modernity, and I think in many reviews written about the film, people were talking about retrofuturism. And I was wondering about how these ideas came about in the design of this world, especially relating to Tiong Bahru as a neighborhood.
Sure. I mean, I think we began Bee Thiam and Wong Ping. I remember them giving me, this kind of thought board, reference board, and specifically looking at retrofuturism. And I think what then happened was a progression. And so for me personally, I don't actually watch a lot of films as my reference points. I like to look at photographs and images. And coming from Mon Uncle and then kind of looking at this idea of a modernity to it, in that I feel like there's been a lot of things done which is this retro feel, and it's been done to death. And so I began to look at images, and we kind of explored this idea of what I'd like to call is like happy minimalism. So it was minimalist images, but with a happy tonal paint choices and colors. And I think there are some reference photos we can see, but they had a great influence in terms of that. And then when you look at those photos, they also begin to have a dialogue with the architecture of Tiong Bahru and the dialogue of circular shapes, which is fluid all the way through. So from the logo to the arch in the building, to the sign that then you see in the architecture of Tiong Bahru, and it creates that link. One of the main, not arguments, but points of slight contention was this idea of how does this commune fit in Tiong Bahru when it's obviously there isn't a house like that in the middle of Tiong Bahru. And so you have to kind of push the reality, and I think we got away with it. But we got away with it, I think, by thankfully finding a location and then also adapting that location to have a dialogue with the architecture. And because of that, you can take those liberties and push the boundaries of the world that you're creating.
Thank you. And would you like to share with us some of the pictures that both you and Bee Thiam and Wan Ping were using as references or as inspirations?
Okay. So this is Tati, this is Mon Uncle. These were the first kind of still frame images, and there was a beauty of this house, this very architecturally, controlled space. But with the lines, the circles, the spacing, the detail, and then there's this minimalism there. But what we were looking at is kind of happy. It's not cold. It's not a cold, hard, white minimalist style. There's a kind of jovial nature to its colors, to its curves, and so from that we begin looking for images, and so the next few photos really are of that process.
And also I would add an absurdity to it. Like you see the fish in the pond that juts out like that, and you look at I think the plants in James' background now.
There is the absurdity. There's an absurdity that we try to incorporate. The plants are a really good example of that. These weird cylindrical plants, the chairs in Gyok's room, the spinning circular bed, and again, all these images, you can see this kind of curves, drapes, the colors, the pastels. It is minimalist, this image is my key image. This was the one image which I had the most amount of kind of coming back to and looking at it and thinking, okay, how can we adapt this into the commune? Because when you look at the architecture of that, it reminds you slightly of Tiong Bahru, but then at the same time, the colors bring it out of a backward-looking period. You know, you're in a very contemporary color scheme. I think one of the gripes I have is now everything, all advertising is this goddamn pastel color pink stuff, which has been going on for the past 2 years, and frankly, it now bores. It's kind of boring now, but it's a shame, because actually the film was made at the before that was becoming, you know, massively popular and massively overused. So yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's a natural, you know, these cycles happen, right? And everyone gets influenced, and one or two things happen, and you know, it continues like that. But I'm quite excited to see what's the next thing. I think we've done this pink thing to death. I think we also have to remember it's not just the commune, that we were looking at these two worlds, and actually we were looking at Jean-Luc Godard at Alphaville was really the main reference for the Pearl Bank and this brutalist architecture. But we didn't want to, actually at one point it was to be shot in black and white. And the start of the film was going to be black and white. And then I think we discussed, and then I think we considered, well, shoot it in color, and you can always go to black and white. Don't make your decision there. And so the room, you know, the unit, and hats off to JX and hats off to people. We had no permission to film in Pearl Bank. We had to come in as tenants. We had to secretly kind of do this. But I think the whole team knew that building's going to go. And we for a long time actually were looking for alternatives. We looked for alternatives to this building because we weren't actually allowed to film it. And we eventually got to the point where we said, look, you know, there's the importance of this building. Architecturally, it's unbelievable in terms of its brutalist architecture, but also in its circular nature, which then again has that dialogue with Tiong Bahru. It's worth the risk to get inside and to do it. So we took an empty white wall unit and renovated it quietly to this kind of quirky, and again there's that quirkiness, you know, with the weird goldfish. I think there was a goldfish painting and fish sculpture and placement of furniture. It's all just slightly off. This is I mean, this is now going into the original building, which is now being torn down. But this is the original space, and I remember fondly the weird rug on the floor, and I was always wondering why the rug is there. And so during this recce, we, you know, pulled up the rug, and as soon as I saw the wooden boards, I knew, because of the, you know, 70s, it was very popular to have cuddle pits. As some people may call them cuddle pits, I call them, you know, other things, but for passion. This particular one, beautifully, was lined with shag pile white carpet, stained in places, questionable. There was an entire history present, both in smell and in touch. And once we removed that carpet, then you know, we could play around with it. But the house was fantastic. It was just about adapting the house. I mean, that's the team.
To clarify, this house is the commune in Tiong Bahru, right? In this,
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, you know, there's always a dialogue, and this is what's interesting sometimes with doing lower kind of films where you have to adapt. And I remember I was very excited by the prospect of the sex scene being observed by people on a balcony. And so when we got there and saw this, we were thinking, well, is the downstairs the map room, or could it even be, you know, this bedroom? And then we have this beautiful moment where at the end of it, the camera can pan up, and there are commune agents looking down at them on the bed, which is great. But what comes first? Is that written or designed first, or is it the architecture speaks to us? And so there's that mutual development, which I think was key with the team, that we were able to develop the script and to develop ideas in dialogue with, you know, with everything that's going on as we progress through the production. And then, I mean, these are renderings and the original drawings of the space and how I was hoping that it would change. And you can see that there's some changes. Some of the walls, the mirrors change. You know, some walls are more painted than others. I think this rendering doesn't have the blue. The curtains change, for example. So there's always these, you know, not everything comes out exactly as you first draw, but you can see there. It's basically there. The drawing is basically there. And then I think we have something. Yeah, I mean, this is the final piece. And it's, you know, these chairs, even the chair with the hole. I mean, I do like to throw in a little bit of imagery of you know, it makes you think, well, why? And I think it's got it there, you know, the red pebble. I think when Bee comes in, he pats the red pebble, and then the chair, which no one ever sits in, you know. But it's minimal, but it's happy, and it's not cold, it's not harsh. And the door, the logo was actually designed by Wang Ping. There was many discussions over what the logo was, and then we all decided that, you know, actually Wang Ping's scribbling was where we should go with it. And I love it. I really thought he did a fantastic logo. And this is I was so excited about getting the bed. We found it from a lady on Carousel, and it was a lady who I kind of suspected was perhaps an escort. And so there was a lot of discussions about getting this giant circular bed. And then she kind of wanted to meet in person. So I kind of got a little excited, and we all went down to the house, the flat. And I was a bit disappointed. She was a very straight-laced, legitimate lady who for some reason had a 6-foot wide circular bed in her room. And it was a steal. We got that bed for $500.
Weren't you
fantastic,
like looking for also a circular water bed with like some like mechanics?
the original idea of the bed. I did a film years ago in Hong Kong called A Camera, which was by a Singaporean director called James Leong. And I was in a sex hotel, not for personal reasons, but for reasons of filming. And when we went to the room, there was a beautiful circular bed, and there was this great red velour background, and in the velour was a car, like a DVD player for a car, which you could put your DVDs and your CD players in, play music. And then there were switches for lights, and there was this one switch which struck me as quite exciting, and I flicked the switch, and the entire bed began to rhythmically, you know, just pumping in the middle. And I mean, fantastic, right? So I was hoping that we could find something like that, but obviously they're not so high tech here, and so they didn't have that kind of bed. But that was, you know, and water beds and rhythmically pumping beds. So
I was so excited when you shared that with us, and so you were trying so hard to find it, but in the end, the bit that you found, although it looks good, but then we have to mechanically push it.
We had to. It also had to be completely reupholstered. So it was a reupholstered bed. I think the reupholsterer was also very curious why, or what we were wanting with this, with piped velour bed, and then it was put on a large turntable, and it took I think 4 to 5 people to actually spin this bed with the 2 people on it, all of whom are hidden in the shop. But of course, to be hidden, they have to lie down in really awkward positions to get this thing. Didn't have enough money for a motorized turntable, so it was done by hand. smoothly. I think the film makes it look like it's motorized, but it's not. Yeah. And this is, yeah, I mean, I really like this one. The chairs were another, again, you know, it's harking back to the Mon Uncle. It's looking for those pieces of furniture, which, you know, it makes sense. There's two chairs in the room, but they are these weird hands, you know, clasping the buttocks of their owners. And then Bee's bedroom. And again, happy minimalist, you know, slightly unusual in terms of the lights under the bed and kind of hiding under the bed. And you can see the drawing is slightly different. And I think for some reason there's a picture. There is the beautiful bed. It's actually for sale by JX. If anyone wants this bed, I'm sure he will sell it to you.
He hasn't used it.
Well, he hasn't unfortunately used it, which is a great shame. But I'm sure it has been used. Yeah. And there's the chairs. Yeah, beautiful chairs, which were bought. I bought those chairs from either a vet's or a dentist. This dentist for some reason had a shop house in Thompson Road. She said, "Come into the storeroom." We went up into the storeroom, and there were these ridiculous chairs. I mean, why you would have chairs like that in a dentist, God only knows. Because they don't look like teeth. I mean, if they were giant teeth, it would make sense, but they're not. And so yes, these chairs came from the dental surgery, I think. And then you have different parts of the world. And you know, I think what was important was, you know, you can invest your time in the commune, but we still need to bring Tiong Bahru into the film. And so again, there was some arguments over this. I really wanted to use the bunker. I think everyone was very concerned that it is an air raid bunker and it's smelly and it's dirty. But for me, there was architecturally, there was something super interesting in that they'd put Bee as a character in the film, in the context of Tiong Bahru, into a bunker. And that the complaints are in this underground bunker and kept underground. And it was just too good to pass up. And so that, I mean, that's the space. And of course we wet the floor and bring in the lights, and it's quite simple to do, but it's, I mean, that's the trick sometimes, is how do you look at these spaces and see what they can give you in terms of what it can do for the film. And then also in terms of the character and in terms of people who know Tiong Bahru. And even if you don't know Tiong Bahru, it still warrants as an interesting space in the film. You don't question it. It's not pandying to the requirement that we need to give a homage to the secrets of Tiong Bahru. Yeah.
And the constraints that James has when we, you know, wanted to use this space is that he only has 1 day to build the set. 1 day to, actually half a day, right, to set it up with the lights, and half a day to shoot. Yeah, so it was really, you know, I think hits off to the team, you know, to be able to pull it off. Yeah.
What made you decide to wet the floor?
Reflections, and because it looks sexy, and you know, I mean, it's an old trick, right? You see any film shot at night in an alleyway, you wet that floor. And I think we were able, because of the sense of it being in the basement, we could just push the reality. I mean, it doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be super, you know. So yeah, you wet the floor, you get the reflection of the logo, the sign, and it looks so much better and so much more expensive and luxurious, and you know, just visually it's the main thing there. I don't think we were kind of suggesting that he's in the sewer. It was just simply, it looks good. Yeah.
But we were also wanting to build the part of like all the dark side of the commune, of the neighborhood, right? This is where all their venting, their complaints comes out, which is at the back of the building, which is at the basement, right? This is the dark secrets, right, of the happy facade. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I think we were really keen to use that location, because of also the architecture and also the position as well. But on the outside, you can see that kind of, you're going underneath the blocks of Tiong Bahru to complain, and you can have people queuing up the stairs and going over.
And on the first day when we were shooting at the back of the building as well, I think it was, you find the garbage collector passing by. Like, so this is where we collect all the garbage as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the locations really have influenced the way what actually happens in the film too.
I think not just the
ideas of
location, but I think James was very involved in location scouting with us, right? Because I think that's where he would look at his plans, right, in terms of his sets and in terms of, like, even when it is outdoor spaces, that he is designing it, right, in terms of how it was used and how it serves the story. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very critical and important that when you're working on a film where you can't just build everything, obviously you need to be really particular and very creative with what you can do, but not limit yourself. Find the places which will then push the film further.
So can you talk a little bit about I don't know, I call it the war room. I don't know what you guys call it.
The map room.
The map room, yeah. That was mostly constructed, right?
Yeah, well, okay, so very early on, actually, there was a black and white house, and it's a famous black and white house in Singapore, 5 Winchester Road, and it's huge. And so the early drawings, of which you don't see here, it was all based on this huge black and white house, which would have had a room in it where you could have had that map table and the podium, And then because of access and SLA, and also, to be honest, it was so big that it was very intimidating in order to have enough lights to light it properly and shoot it, that we look for another location. And so then we were struck with the problem that we simply don't have a space for this map room. But I think we discussed it more and more, and my opinion on it was that you needed to see her going in, but it could be a black box. It could be a theater black box, because it is kind of this sci-fi world. It's you get a sense of scale, but obviously it's big and it's a big map and they're all there, but you don't need it to be in a particular space, because it's these kind of unexplained government bodies looking, and obviously there's the URA map, and so we were there's all this concept of maps. And then the eggs, I mean, the golden eggs. I remember getting very excited finding these golden metallic eggs from Taobao, I think, or Alibaba, because we were trying to think, egg, humans, and then actually what it doesn't pick up, there are small pictures of every single actor on those eggs, which you don't quite see, just fine, but you can just about see it. But there's little images on every single egg of all the different neighbors and agents and everyone. And then the fact that we also we altered the map. There is alterations to the Tiong Bahru, but basically that's Tiong Bahru map, the old section. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, James, for sharing in detail. I mean, it's just like really fun to talk to you about this, because you can see just how much care and detail was put into every single aspect, and it's just really fascinating for us audience members to find out what went on behind the scenes. So I also wanted to ask Melissa, because I think in the same amount of detail and care goes into the costumes as well. And but maybe let's talk about a little bit first about how you conceptualize the costumes and how you work together with Bee Thiam, and also how like the themes of modernity and the idea of a commune played into the way you conceptualize the costumes.
I think for me it was quite quite easy pulling out references for the happiness agent. When we talked about the happiness agent's uniforms, like straight up, we were already thinking about like Yoji Yamamoto, Craig Green. We were also thinking like Cons Dickinson, which is a lot of like utilitarian style, but we made it happy. That's why yellow. That's why we pick yellow. And it's different kind of textures of yellow. It's like what you would think a uniform would look like in Singapore. Our version of a happy utilitarian uniform. And Lionel, my assistant costume designer, we talked a lot about how it should function. So we added all these like tiny details that would seem kind of out of place, but we still wanted to tie it into the whole world, which is a bit whimsical. So we mix and match the tops that he designed with pieces from Taobao. And we added very functional sneakers for the guys and very cute like braided flats for the girls. And then we added like some accessories, like clear bags and like funky sunglasses for the pool scenes. So that was how we, conceptualize the uniforms for the commune. And as for the corporation stuff, we just looked at like some vintage photos and we kind of followed the circles and lines of Tiong Bahru, the commune that James designed. And then we were like, okay, we need to play with it. And we picked navy and pink for the corporation stuff. Yeah. So it was actually, I would feel our design came more from color. I think Tiong Bahru is a film we all design based on color. So that's why it's such a like treat for the eyes. When you watch it, you're like, oh, okay, I noticed like, oh, it's a bit different. Why is it a bit different? Because it's so colorful. And we never held back on making the characters more out of the box. Yeah. And working with Bee Thiam and Wan Ping was very interesting for Lionel and I, because we are the kind of people that are okay with being put on a leash, that kind of thing. Like we are fine if people rein us in. But for some reason, Bee Thiam was like, okay, Mel, okay, Lionel, you can do whatever you want. Just like do little tweaks for me here and there. So we kind of just ran with it. And it was very interesting the way it played out. Yeah, which is what you see in the film, where there's so many textures and shapes, but they're all integrated because both me and Lionel align so well on our initial references. Yeah.
Can you share with us a bit of your references?
Oh yeah.
Or maybe before that, can I ask you what do you mean by designing from color? I mean, I find that super interesting also because how it interrelates with all the different aspects of the film, the production design, the cinematography.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting. So I'm not a trained fashion designer. Lionel is, but I style things by color. So I look at the shape and the color and how it falls together. So Lionel is my technical magician on this movie, and after we talked for the first time, I showed him all my references, and then he was like, okay, now I get you. And then he drew out the first draft, and then we were like, wow, that's actually kind of what we want. And then I picked like certain pieces to add on to the top that he designed. So we just slowly built from there, from the top and then the bottom, and like, oh, what shoes shall they wear? What do they do in those shoes? Like, they are going to go for swimming lessons. They're going to push Miss Wee around. Like what adds texture to the character. So that was how so that was how our references turned into what you see on film. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And yeah, if you would like to show us some of your designs and references, that would be really amazing.
So this was the color palette in which I built it from. I wanted to make very sure that it wasn't just like a very standard uniform. I wanted different textures and different tones of yellow, because Tiong Bahru is actually a very diversified movie, and we wanted to reflect that like through like a thicker fabric, which Abi actually wears a thicker fabric because he is more, you know, straight edge and, you know, like sturdy. So we wanted him to wear a thicker fabric, but for the girls, especially like Orchid, we gave her a softer fabric. And so from the color palette, and then we looked at our references, like this is obviously super high fashion, but what we really did was to take all these references and turn it into the happiness agents, which is, these are actually very, very initial sketches, which had way more detail on them. And then we cut them down so it would be more functional on screen. Yeah. So a lot of it was actually like half bought and half put together. And I will show you guys one of our initial.
So it's a mix of like utilitarian design and also
Yeah.
the ropes, I'm not sure what you call the ribbons. It's like with like extra
Yes.
high fashion details.
Yeah. We tried to mix high fashion and utilitarian. We never got to the active wear, but that's all right. Okay, I will show everyone like a test we first did for one of our initial. We wanted to see how it was like just someone walking around in the commune. So this was one of our first videos. That after watching it, we Lionel and I, like in our design process, we realized like, maybe we should, for continuity's sake, make the details less obvious. So it became more streamlined as what you see in the film right now. Yeah. And yeah.
Go ahead.
I shall stop sharing. Yeah. So that was how we came up with the whole happiness agent uniforms that were the centerpiece of our costumes for this film.
So you mentioned a bit also about the difference between the administrative agents, right? Am I using the right words? Yeah, and how are they how do you see them contrasting besides in terms of color, like in terms of the tightness of their clothes, and also like the
structure?
No, what's the name of the character who is the boss, and she wears a very flamboyant hat, you know?
Yeah.
So how do you see that as contrasting to happiness agents?
I actually have this reference photo of Kate Middleton as our reference photo for Anita's character in Tiong Bahru Social Club. We just felt like she should be a badass woman who, you know, like wore like this really fancy costume to work every day. And very early on also, Bee Thiam and JX and Bee Thiam and JX and casting already told me like, hey, they're all gonna be women, you know this, right? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, you know, obviously, and then how that translated to me was the uniforms. I just wanted it to be very structured, but I didn't want it to be like so uniform. So I gave all of them boots as well. So it's like very cute seeing them like walk around in the house. And yeah, that was the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, I think like when you say the word uniform, we usually think of like school uniforms or like military uniforms, which is like very, you know, plain and very severe. But these uniforms are like so colorful and so loud and bright, and it's you know, it's really just a stroke of imagination for us, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the whole retro future look that James and Bee Thiam came up with, and we all just ran with it as well. That
I
was
if I jump in, I think what Mel did a great job in was when you do the retro futurist, it's very easy to end up creating a homage to the 60s and the 70s. And so I think what was fantastic with what Mel and Lionel worked on was that there is a very much is contemporary in that there is no kind of nostalgia to those uniforms. But the inspiration, yes, with even looking at old air stewards and like concepts, you can see that there's an influence there, but it's not looking back. And I think that was so important that they achieved that. It was very good.
And I think we also benefited a lot from Wan Ping, because Wan Ping, he's very into fashion. So he keep throwing us like, ideas of like, oh, Pierre Cardin has this collection in like this year that is like super avant-garde, and we should definitely check it out. And like, so it comes out with like different headgear and all those kind of things that we were trying. But we were also very, I think Lionel and Melissa, they are also very quick to adapt and to throw out things that doesn't work, Yeah, so they are very gung-ho to try, but then they throw out things that doesn't work very quickly.
Yeah. That was quite us. One of the other characters I really enjoyed styling was Miss Wee. So initially I was watching Frankie and Grace, and I thought like, maybe a little bit like a hobo artist past their prime for Miss Wee, but then Miss Wee is way more sharp than that, right? So I was thinking more like a graphic artist who has retired, and then someone who paints. Because if you think about her, she should be a very typical Singaporean auntie, right? She looks scared, she's like grumpy all the time. So how do you add more texture to her character? It's really through her clothes. And we had a really good sponsor for Miss Wee, Meta Prints. Thank you so much for lending us your clothes, which is the iconic scene of them dancing. Like the lines really help like make her movement like flow, and I enjoy watching that scene so much. And Jalyn herself, she was so keen to try all my clothes. She would try, then she'll be like, oh, I feel good in this, and I'll be like, yes, okay, we got it. Yeah, I just didn't want her to be like any other Singaporean auntie. So I just went out, saw a couple of like shops where the style was a bit different, more graphics, more like asymmetrical cuts, and that was really the building blocks of Miss Wee's character.
And can you talk a bit about Abby's mother? I mean, she's also not a typical auntie in a way, although she's very familiar, but she's not, right?
Yeah. Because Abby's mom stays at Pearl Bank, and there are so many interesting people that stay in Pearl Bank, I feel like, and especially like the way James designed their family home. And Abby's mom, Mui, is actually inspired by my mom. So my mom sews and designs her own clothes growing up, and she loves all these like retro prints that no one else wears in this day and age. And it's filled with a lot of colors and like this very like vintage but timeless, I feel, and actually coming back into trend. So she would wear like Peter Pan collar dresses. And one day I just like went up to her and was like, oh, I'm gonna borrow a few of your pieces for work. And she was like, okay, sure. And and I slowly added it, and I fitted Guat in it, and she was like, wow. A very interesting story about the dress she wore to Tiong Bahru for the first time is that I brought my mom out once for brunch, and I was like, oh, it's a really good looking dress. And I could immediately I could immediately imagine that dress in Tiong Bahru just because of the checks and the green and like how like classic that dress is. It's like a special occasion, but you know, special occasion, but not too dressy, and like something you will visit your son in a very, very happy mood in. Yeah, Mui's clothes really is just my personal touch to the film, where you know, her character is
So most of her clothes were.
my
Sorry,
mom's. Yeah,
my internet was a bit laggy. Most of her clothes were your mom's clothes.
yeah, except for her pajamas, which we very specifically wanted a hair roller in her fringe, even though it kind of doesn't make sense, but that was our touch to, you know, just trying to make the film a little bit more comedic. Like it doesn't need to be real. It can be a little bit weird, and that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, it was such a wonderful story to you sharing about
Yeah.
your mom and your personal, you know, connection with the film.
Yeah.
I think adding on to what Mel was saying, especially when it comes to costuming, is also, I think, the makeup artist and the makeup designer, which is Antonio, as well as the hair designer, which is Leong. So they also worked very closely with Mel, you know, in terms of the style of the actors. Yeah. So
I mean, it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating to see how all these parts, you know, fit together, and one each part like builds on each other, and it really feels like a, you know, a real connection between the team. So yeah, and it really shows on screen how this world is so complete and so inviting to us to watch. Yeah. So congratulations again, James, Melissa, and Bee Thiam, and thank you so much for bringing us this film. And I'm so happy to be able to be just, you know, to ask you to get the opportunity to ask you questions and to find out more about the process of the film. And I'm sure everyone else is also, you know, has also benefited a lot from this session. So thank you, everyone.
thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.
And I think I want to also add that, I mean, this is a session with like the designers of the film, including, you know, like with Leong, Antonio, and Wan Ping. But I think we would not have been possible to come together as well if not for JX. So I think JX is really that special person who brought us, you know, together, and who was very generous as well in providing us the resources when we told him that, oh, we really need this, or we really need that. He's not the one who just denied us in the budget because he needs to keep things, you know, in check. So yeah, I think it is not just the designers. Also, I think it is also the designers working with, you know, other departments, right, to make this work, including with locations, you know, and, you know, other departments. Yeah. So a thank you to, I think, everyone who contributed to the film, and we really hope, I think, the audience can go catch the film on a big screen so that you can see all the details. Yeah. Thank you.